Hello folks, and welcome back to my channel. I am back at it with another Halloween card video. This one is a little interactive scene using lots of products from Lawn Fawn. So I guess I'll get right into the stamping here. It is quite the process. So I use a couple different Lawn Fawn stamp sets. The main one here is the Fox Costumes Before and Afters stamp set, which is the one that is shown here. It's got these little foxes and they're dressed up for Halloween, you know, they're trick-or-treaters, so I'm stamping out all the foxes. As well as some of the little costumes that you can dress this normal fox up in. So I'm going to make him into a bat later on, so I'm stamping out the wings. I'm also stamping out these little birds that are also dressed up for Halloween that I think are so cute. And I'm stamping them onto white cardstock, and I'm going to be using Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink. I am also pulling images from the costume party stamp set from Lawn Fawn, so I just wanted a whole bunch of candy to add to my scene, so that is what I'm doing. I'm just selecting some of these little candy images, some of the chocolate bars, and you know, the candy corns and stuff like that. I'm also adding images from this Happy Howloween stamp set. I initially planned on making one of my foxes like a fairy princess, so you could still do that with the wings and, you know, the little wand, but I don't end up actually doing that in this video. Just an idea, I guess, if you wanted to. And I'm also using the Purrfectly Wicked add-on stamp set from Lawn Fawn, so I'm just adding this bunch of candies that I'll be using to kind of put in my trees and stuff like that to set the scene. So here I'm going ahead and I'm stamping out multiples of these same images, so I'm cleaning them off, I'm rearranging them, and I'm going to stamp them again. So I'm stamping multiples of the candies, a second pair of wings if I was actually going to use them, and then I also have multiples of these, I guess, trick-or-treat bags, little pails and stuff. I don't end up using them either. I had quite the vision going into this card, but I just didn't have enough space. But if you're using less trick-or-treaters, you could have little pails and stuff like that. And I'm also stamping out another bunch of candy here at the top, because there are 3 trees I'm using in this die. They have 3 flaps, so I'm going to need 3 of these bunches to kind of layer behind the trees. If you don't know what I'm talking about, hopefully it'll make sense later, but I promise there is a reason for me stamping out multiples of all these images. And as per usual, I will go ahead and die cut these out later after I Copic color. So to start us off with the coloring, let's start off with the foxes because why not? So the 3 colors I'm using for my foxes here are YR27, YR24, and YR21. And I'm going to be using the YR27 and the YR24, I guess, for the more reddish parts of my foxes, so on like their little nose bridges, their arms, their legs, and stuff like that. And then I'm going to be using the YR24 and the 21 together to color in like the little where the eyes are, their little bellies, and the tips of their tails and stuff like that. So I'm only using 3 colors, but I'm getting quite the variation out of it, which I really enjoy, and these colors all blend together really nicely, so that makes life a little easier. I find, you know, blends and stuff between colors can really be like hit or miss, depending on like the color family and stuff that you're using. So these ones all blended together lovely, and I got quite the variation, and I'm just going to be using this combination for all 4 of my foxes. You could go ahead and use other colors and add variation between them, but I just tried to keep it simple and make them all sort of the same color here. And then I'm going in with some grays here. This is N9, N7, and N5, and I'm going to be using that for like my black color combination, I guess. So I'm just adding that very sparingly to the little bat wings, the bat headpiece, like the little ears and stuff like that, and to the little stripes on the little bee. For my yellow combination, I am using Y17, Y15, and Y13. Again, they all blend together really nicely, and I'm going to be using those on a lot of elements here, so I'm adding them to a lot of my candies. Obviously the candy corns, they have yellow on them. The bee here, some sprinkles on the cupcake. It's just, I'm using a lot of yellows. The little crown, you know, for the little fairy princess that I was going to have, stuff like that. So I'm just taking in yellow pretty much all over the card. On some of the smaller pieces here, like these tiny pieces of candy, I'm not too worried about adding so much shading and depth because they are just small images. So I'm just going in with like 1 or 2 markers and stuff like that. I'm not, you know, the most excessive with the coloring here when images are just so small. And then for my orange combination, I'm using YR09, YR07, and YR04. And it's the same deal with the yellows. I'm adding it to a lot of the candies and stuff, so I'm not super detailed with the shading. I'm also adding some orange to this little pumpkin bird guy. He's really cute. I love him. And to some of these trick-or-treating pails and stuff like that. And then for some of these lighter, I guess, elements, like I have like the ghost sheet, some of these fairy wings, stuff like that, I am using BG10 and then BG quadruple 0 and stuff like that. Very light blending, very light shading, but still adds some color. For my pinks, I'm using RB14 and RB13. It's a very bubblegummy kind of pink, so I'm using that for like the icing, for some of the candies, this little donut guy here, and stuff like that. I felt like with Halloween, I just love having bright neonish colors, so I have like this really bright orange, this really bright yellow, and this pink kind of fits in with those colors as well. For my violets, I'm using V4 and V6, and again, this one I don't use a whole lot. I'm just using it for some candies, for some small little elements, so I'm not too focused with good blending and stuff like that, especially with these violets. They can be tough to blend, so I'm just keeping it simple. For my greens, I'm using YG09, YG06, and YG05. So again, I'm just going in order from darkest to lightest and keeping it fairly simple, coloring in the rest of the candies that I don't have already colored. So I feel like the greens just really pulled all the coloring together and stuff like that. And I love the shade of green as well. Again, it's very neon, it's very Halloweenish to me, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out. I'm using some R29 and R24 for my red combination here. Again, this is very, very little of the coloring, just some cherries and stuff like that, some sprinkles, just tiny little details. I forgot to color these birds, so I'm going back in with some of the yellows I was using earlier to color those guys. Adding some green to the pumpkin stems, just pulling everything together, coloring all the little things I forgot to color earlier and stuff like that. And because I prefer to do things this way, I'm going ahead and stamping these little faces onto these gift bags now. The stamp is from the Fox Costumes Before and Afters, and I like to do it after so I don't smear anything because I have a bad habit of smearing ink while I color. Moving on, I have this black piece of cardstock that I'm going to be cutting out using the Lift the Flap tree backdrop die from Lawn Fawn. It's a really spooky little tree. It'd also be good for like winter scenes, but I love this one for Halloween. So I'm going to go ahead and run that through my die cutting machine and then lift and fold these flaps using my embossing folder here just to kind of get the mechanism ready to work. And I'm going to go ahead and measure out some of this scrap cardstock. So it's scrap white cardstock I have. And I'm just going to kind of roughly see how big I need these pieces to be to lay behind the holes of the trees, because I want to make it look like my trees are like filled with candy and stuff like that, and have them have a darker color compared to the backdrop, because I want this to be interactive. I want people to lift the flaps and stuff like that. So I'm just going to add a backing to them and stuff like that to add more detail. So once I have these white pieces of cardstock measured and cut very loosely, I just use my pencil and a pair of scissors, I'm going to go ahead and just add some color to them using Villainous Potion Distress Oxide ink. I just went for inking because I love inking. You could of course just cut this out of like purple cardstock and glue it behind your trees, and honestly that would probably be a little bit easier, but I love this color for Halloween, and I mean, like, the name is perfect even in itself, like Villainous Potion, that's so Halloweenish, you know what I mean? So I just wanted to use it when I was putting this card together. So I'm just, going over it really rough, and then I'm gonna add some water splatter. Again, these pieces aren't very big, they're not a focal point of this card, so like, you don't have to add this much detail. Purple cardstock would be fine, be lazy, but I just had to do the most, so I'm going ahead and spritzing them with water, dabbing it off, letting those dry. Next, I'm taking a standard card base, so this is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. It will fit behind the Lawn Fawn die that I was using earlier, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of do a green spooky scene for my sky. So I'm using Distress Oxide as per usual. I like them, they're a comfort medium, they blend really smooth. And I'm using Twisted Citron right in the center. I'm going to blend that out and fade it out as best as I can. And I'm going to go around that with some of this Lucky Clover Distress Oxide ink and kind of blend those two together, try to get a nice even gradient between my two shades in this ring kind of formation. And then at the very edges, I'm going to darken it up just a little bit using some of the Pine Needles Distress Oxide ink here. So they're all within the same family of a very greenish type green. And they blend really nicely, and they're just, again, they're nice neon solid greens, and I feel like they're very spooky for the Halloween season. I love a good green backdrop, especially for Halloween scenes. It's just so eerie, and I love it so much, so that's what I'm doing here. Once I'm happy with my background, you can stop here, but of course I'm going to go ahead and pull it all together with some splatter on the backgrounds to add some spooky ambiance to the card, because why not? So I'm going to go ahead and flick some clean water. I'm putting that on my glass mat and then flicking it onto my card using a clean paintbrush. I'm going to let that water sit and activate with the Distress Oxide inks for a couple seconds and then dry it off using a clean towel. Next, I'm going to take this Black Soot Distress ink spray. So it's just this black spray. I'm going to add that on. I'm also flicking on some of this green watercolor. It's shimmery. It's the Ganzai Tambi Gem Colors watercolors. So I'm adding some green shimmer, some black speckle, just to add, again, ambience, spookiness, and some sparkle, to the card. And I feel like that really pulls my background together. While I wait for my background to dry, I am taking this piece of purple cardstock and I'm going to run it through my die cutting machine using the Grassy border die from Lawn Fawn. It's a very straight, simple grass border, and it is the size, it's 5.5 inches long, so it will fit along the bottom of my card, but I want to kind of keep it simple, you know what I mean? So again, I'm going to go ahead and spookify my grass after I have it cut out using some Black Soot Distress ink. Totally optional, but I just kind of wanted to set the scene, make it look more nighttimey, and then the grass will kind of blend into the trees I have in my background. And that's where I'm going to put my sentiment, is on this bottom border here. I made it just big enough to fit a sentiment. So the sentiment I'm using is from the Happy Howloween stamp set, but feel free to use any sentiment that suits your fancy. The one I specifically chose was No Tricks, Just Treats, because I felt like it kind of fit what I was going for in my scene here. So I'm going to prep my cardstock, just adding some of this anti-static powder tool because I will be heat embossing, and I don't want my embossing powder to stick to any other part that I don't want it to stick to, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp my sentiment here using some Simon Says Stamp clear ink. It's a clear ink, but it's also sticky, so my embossing powder will stick to it. And I am using some Ranger Superfine Detail White embossing powder. I'm going to sprinkle that over my sentiment once I have it stamped, and I'm going to heat set that with my heat gun. While you can definitely stop here with just your white sentiment, I'm taking this a step further. So I'm going to add some glow-in-the-dark embossing powder. So I'm repeating those same steps. My sentiment stamp is still lined up in the same spot, so I'm just inking it again. I'm going to sprinkle more embossing powder on top of the sentiment I already have. This one is from WoW with a little exclamation point, and it is the glow-in-the-dark embossing powder. So when you kind of charge this underneath a lamp and then you turn off the lights, the sentiment will glow, which I think is very spooky, very Halloweenish, very on theme, and I just had to use this glow-in-the-dark embossing powder at some point during the Halloween season. It's just so fun and so cool not to have on your cards. So moving on, I have this tree backdrop that I had cut out earlier, and I'm just flipping that over, and I'm going to prep this or kind of loosely assemble my interactive element here. So I'm just adding some tape around the little tree holes, I guess, and I'm also using some liquid glue for this as well. And I'm going to go ahead and glue these little candy pieces that I had die cut and colored earlier so that it looks like I have these little stashes of candy inside these trees. And after I have the candy piece stuck down, I'm going to go ahead and add these little purple rectangles I had made earlier behind it, so I have like the inside of the tree as well. So it's not the same as the background, it looks like the tree is hollow on the inside and it's just filled with all this candy from these trick-or-treaters. So that was the goal. Next, I am taking just a standard green, I guess, card base here that will fit my 5.5 by 4.25 inch card, and I'm going to go ahead and mount down that background I had ink blended earlier now that it's all dry and I'm not going to smear anything, and I'm just mounting that down using my standard Scotch ATG gun. The next thing I'm going to do is mount down this tree panel I have all ready and set up. So I'm going to glue that down using some ATG gun as well as some of this double-sided tape. I don't want this frame to peel up. I want this to be nice and stuck to my card because there are interactive elements. People are going to be taking this in and out of envelopes. I want everything to be nice and secure, and this tape is really good for that. On the flip side though, it's also super duper sticky, so if I were to mess up kind of putting this onto my card base, it's hard to move it afterwards, and that can kind of be painful if you don't line things up right. So I'm just half peeling some of this backing, or I guess this release paper, and I'm going to line up my corners in my stamping press here so that, you know, in theory, it's like a foolproof way of mounting things down. So I kind of get my corners set up, I realize, okay, it's going on, it's sticking on right, and then I'm going to peel off the rest of the release papers and get everything fully stuck together. But it's just a good, easier way of lining things up without, you know, the risk of having to peel it all apart after and stuff like that. And likewise, I'm going to be using the double-sided tape to stick down this little grass piece here. I'm also using some liquid glue on the actual grass bits because I don't want them to peel up either. I want everything to be nice and stuck down and not move. And this will just make sure that everything is nice and stuck down and won't move. So I'm going to go ahead and glue that down to the very bottom of my card. You can use the stamp press to kind of line this one up as well, but it's kind of a smaller piece, so I wasn't too worried about that. We're on to the fun part, which is setting and assembling the scene together. So off camera, as you can see, I kind of have all my elements laid out, but they're not glued down just yet. I'm going to do some rough assembly of some other elements, so I'm just going to go ahead and glue on these bat wings to my fox. So I have this fox bat guy here, and I'm using liquid glue for that. And I'm going to go ahead and, you know, glue down the rest of my elements I have laid down here, again with some of that liquid glue. Because I like liquid glue, it's just really sturdy, it holds up really nice. As you can see here, I'm using my tweezers to kind of peel up some of these candies in my trees, so I can also stick these little birds as a little surprise inside my little trees. So I have these birds, you know, they're stashing stuff away, the foxes are helping, everybody's just having a good time, and it's Halloween, you know what I mean? So that is what I'm doing. I'm also going to be using some thin foam squares for other elements as well. And I'm also using the liquid glue as well to kind of glue down some of these little candy pieces. When I was stamping and coloring elements for this card, I really thought I would have a lot more room for a lot more stuff, so it is kind of a crowded scene. You can of course do less, but I thought, why not use the elements I have already, you know, and everything kind of works out well. I have an odd amount of characters. I have 7, you know, people going on here. I have like 3 birds, 4 foxes, an odd amount. I have an oddish amount of candy inside and around the trees. So like, it works. It's very busy, but it works. It's still an odd number. It's still, the eye catches everything nicely, and the color palettes work well together. So while it is crowded and it's kind of out of my comfort zone, I don't like crowding this much stuff onto a card. I just wanted to use it all, or as much as I could, and that is what I did. So feel free to do, you know, customize, if you're doing this card, feel free to customize it however you like. You know, you can only use certain trick-or-treaters that you like. I wanted a healthy balance between cute ones, so like the cupcake and the little bumblebee, and some actual spooky Halloweeny ones. So like the little bat, the pumpkin, the ghost, and my little skeleton dude. So I tried to have balance, but feel free to, you know, make this card in a way that suits your fancy and in what you like to see. So again, off camera, I went and I laid out some of these elements before I'm going to go ahead and commit to gluing them down. I'm really fussy and I'm really particular about my scenes, so I like to lay things out and see what I can do and see what I like, and then commit to it by gluing it down. So I wanted some of these candies stuck up in the trees. Like, they just had so much, the trees were so full that they just had to stash it in like the branches and stuff like that. So I'm going ahead and adding like lollipops and King Choco bars into the little trees here. Also, because I just had so much candy stamped out and it just wouldn't fit on the ground, why not throw it up in the trees with all the other stuff? So that is what I'm doing here. And again, just liquid glue, keeping it simple, and using my tweezers and this little picker upper tool to kind of help me out with that. And as per usual on all my cards, I really like to use gel pens to add more definition, clean up line work, and stuff like that on these cards. It really pulls your images together and really refines the look. So I always use the Jelly Roll pens in a white 10-point, a clear sparkle, and a black glaze pen. So I'm adding sparkle because I love sparkle and I add it pretty generously. I'm using the white to add like little, you know, dots to the cheeks, clean up some lines, add some, I guess, shine to the candies and stuff like that because they're packaged and why not. And then I'm using black glaze on all the eyes and stuff like that so they have a nice reflection and stuff and they just look more alive, I guess. It just adds so much more definition to the cards and I love the way it turns out. To pull together all my images here, I'm also using this clear glaze from Lawn Fawn. It's this clear glaze pen, I guess. And so I'm just adding that to some of these candies. It's going to be multi-dimensional, and it's going to dry clear, and it's going to be kind of like it's going to have this gloss to it and stuff like that. It just makes the candies look like candies. And as I said before, I had a whole bunch of these candies left over. I stamped and colored way too much, but doesn't mean it can go to waste. You know, I can use this on other cards, or I can add some to the inside of my card here. So I'm going to go ahead and glue those down near the bottom, just because why not? I have it. I have all the stuff out. I might as well decorate the inside too. And that's always fun. It's another extra surprise for the card recipient. Another finishing touch I'm adding to this card is a sentiment on the inside. The sentiment is from the Fox Costumes Before and After stamp set, and I'm stamping it in Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and that will finish off my card here. So I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, share. It's a great way to support me in the channel. I also have an Instagram link down below if you want to follow me there. Thank you so much. Have a great day.